What was the moment that things started to change for you? Was there something that happened that made you start to change the way you act or the way you think?
Yeah, there was a particular day where, I spoke about this in one of my other videos. You can catch it on my YouTube called "Who Am I," which was about my entire life, and I had something what I call like a spiritual awakening. Looking back, I was never spiritual, wasn't looking at anything like religious or anything, didn't believe in God. But my life had been pressurized so much where I was almost saved from putting a rope around my neck and killing myself. And the next day, without asking, without, praying to God, I woke up and, you know, it was like everything was a dream prior to that. And it was almost like I became this observer of myself. So I was no longer the character which was created through my previous experiences. I was no longer the internal working model. I was no longer this voice in my head telling me how awful I was, how terrible everybody was. All of a sudden, I was this observer of it, right? Which separated me from that character, from those internal workings and behavior. And it was, to this day, even at the time, I say I always say that I was never asking for it. I wasn't praying for it, but to this day, I thank God, that it happened to me. It doesn't mean that you have to go through so much pain and suffering to a point where you're going to kill yourself to experience this separation of self. It can be done with, training with a qualified individual, someone who's lived the experience like myself. I'd even argue, I know some people might not like what I'm about to say, but I would even argue probably more so than some clinical, clinicians, clinical psychologists to a degree, because I have the lived experience. I have the same qualifications as a forensic psychologist. I have the same qualifications to be registered with the B.P.I.C as a member for graduate chartered membership. And I also have my own lived experience, like real life experience. This time next year, or this maybe a little bit longer, I'm going to finish my PhD in evolutionary and behavioral psychology. So I'll be a doctor, Dr. Kyle Walker, but I'll still be sat like this. My name's Kyle. I'll never, although on paper I'll be Dr. Kyle Walker, but I will ask everybody to address me as Kyle, because I am a human being. And the reason I've gone through all this, this acquisition of knowledge is to help people. Yeah.
So, what do you think people fail to realize that you did at that point? Like people going through pains and suffering, what have they failed to realize to make a change in their lives? That they are responsible. Short and precise.
That they are responsible. They are responsible, accountability. And it's awful. This is a thing, because it's awful, right? Because let's think about this. I am not responsible for what happened to me. Yeah. I'm not responsible for my mum putting me in a hotel room and setting it on fire and leaving me inside to burn. I'm not responsible for that. But I created adaptations. My brain, which is an amazing adaptive organ, made me adapt to that environment, right? Which became dysfunctional as an adult. But I'm no longer in that burning room. I'm no longer there. But the adaptations of that experience are there. So this is where the difficulty comes in for people, because of course I'm not responsible for what happened to me, nor is anybody who's listening to this. You're not responsible for what happened to you. But you are responsible right now in this moment to take accountability and responsibility for those adaptations.
So why do people keep reacting the same way, even though they know it's not helping?
So I sort of went through this as well, like I used to do terrible things, and then I never used to walk away and go, oh yeah, that showed them. I used to go away and think to myself, why do I keep doing this? Why do I keep doing it? Why do I keep acting and reacting this way? And it's almost like when I had these emotional reactions or these emotional intense build-ups, it's like I got possessed, possessed by anger, possessed by sadness, possessed by misery, possessed by jealousy, or, the idea that, everybody's out to get me. I got possessed by this character and became it, and just became it. And as I move my actions into this world and weave them into this world, my environment responds to that, right? If I'm hostile and I act with hostility, my environment is going to mirror hostility back to me. And then my brain's going to say, see, the world's hostile. Not understanding that my hostility is what influenced the hostility in the environment, right? So if I go into a pub and I walk into the pub and go, yeah, well, come on, who wants some, this and that and the other, what's going to happen? People are going to turn around and go, oh, who's this guy? What's he want? So I'm going into this environment with a hostile worldview, that I can't control, which I'm possessed by, and I go into an environment and act upon that behavior, and then the environment mirrors that back to me, which then we look at complexity theory, and in layman's term, we talk about this a recursive feedback loop. So I feel a response, I act it out, the environment replays that response back to me, and it feeds into this idea that, okay, so the world's hostile, not understanding that it's my hostility that elicited, that created, that brought about the hostility in my environment. But oh no, it's not me, it's everybody else. Look, the world's hostile. It was me who elicited that in that response in my own environment. So it's a very difficult one for people because.
So, how much of this behavior is caused by past experiences?
Majority of it, the majority of it. If we look at the nature versus nurture argument, and it was around for quite some time, and people sort of lent into nature, some people lent into nurture. So let me break that down. Nature means genetic predisposition, so I'm genetically, wired a certain way to behave a certain way. Nurture means the environment, brings about those behaviors. Upbringing and environment brings about those behaviors. So quite a while ago now, we used to look at the nature versus nurture, but now we understand that actually it's very, very little nature. So we can all be genetically predisposed for particular types of behaviors, but the environment will turn those the epigenetics predispositions on. So say, for example, me and you could be genetically, predisposed to be impulsive, right? If I was raised in an environment where my mum and dad lavishly spent money, but always complained about not having any money, but lavishly spent money, I would learn from my environment, which would then elicit and ignite that genetic predisposition, and I would become quite impulsive. It's usually the case. If you have the same genetic makeup as me, or similar genetic makeup as me, and you have that genetic predisposition to be impulsive, but yet you was brought up in a family which was very careful, very organized, very orderly, but not to the point where it was impulsive, shall we say, you'd be less inclined to become impulsive as an adult. It's nurture is fundamentally the key to our behavior. Nurture happens developmentally throughout our life, from the day we were born to yesterday. Something could have happened to me yesterday which would, if it was a significant event, could shift my behavior moving forward into the future.
Let's talk about motivation. Do you think motivation can probably change the way you behave, especially given your past experiences, without necessarily addressing the root cause?
So can motivation give us the drive that we need to change behavior? No. Motivation, no. Motivation is like happiness. And motivation is like similar to an emotion, right? So motivation is sometimes there and sometimes isn't there, right? So sometimes we are motivated to change. Sometimes we are motivated to go to the gym. Sometimes we are motivated to read a book. Discipline, doing the thing that you know that you need to do, even though you don't want to do it. So let me repeat that: to do the thing that you know you need to do, even though you don't want to do it. Right? So for an example, let's break it down so simply, it's unreal. I have this goal. I want to change some behavior. Let's say gym, because it's easy. I want to go to the gym and I want to, get fit and healthy. Motivation is not going to be the thing that carries you through the entire journey. It might be the thing that starts the journey, right? Because you've got to be motivated to do something different, right? There are going to be mornings that you wake up and it's cold outside and it's raining outside and you have a unanimous array of voices in your head telling you it's cold, stay warm, do it tomorrow, pick it up Monday. And we fall prey to those voices, right? So the motivation is not there now, right? And sometimes if we keep that repeating those thought processes, we lose motivation altogether and we stop reaching and aiming for the goal.
Yeah.
But let's go back to that same morning. I wake up, I'm tired, I can't be bothered, it's raining outside, I'm warm inside my bed. I know I really don't want to do it, but I know that the goal that I want to achieve, it is necessary for me to get out of bed and go for a run. So you almost have to become defiant of the mind, right? So when your mind's giving you all these unanimous, array of voices saying, stay in bed, it's cold, become defiant. No, I'm not going to stay in bed. No, yeah, it's cold. Yeah, I am warm here. But I know what I need to do. I know I need to take accountability and responsibility for the goal that I want to achieve. Use the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 rule. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, get out of bed. Make that your first goal to get out of bed. You sat up now, you're in bed. Oh, God, I don't want to go. It's raining. Aberdeen, it's terrible, it's cold, I'm warm. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, stand up, put your socks on. That's your second goal done. Oh, God, this is awful as you're putting your socks on. Still don't want to do it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, walk downstairs, put your shoes on. God, I'm just about to open the door. It's snowing outside. It's awful weather. Go on, Kyle. Come on, you'll be all right till Monday. Just one more day. Just have a rest today. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Open the door. And I can guarantee you, while you go on that run or whatever it is that you do, after you've beaten that internal dialogue, you will be rewarded significantly while you're doing the thing that you didn't want to do. Halfway through doing that, you'll start thinking to yourself, oh my God, I'm doing it. I didn't want to do this. I'm doing it. So motivation, it's one of those things that we all speak about, but the simple answer is no, motivation will not get you where you want to go. It'll start. It can get you started, but it will not carry you through.
So what's the cost of not changing this pattern? Taking, for instance, the motivation you talked about, and people want to just follow their predisposition at that point. Like, say I want to go to the gym today. Okay, I feel motivated. I'm going to the gym. I don't want to go tomorrow because I'm not motivated. So what is the cost of this, not changing this pattern?
Go to your deathbed the same you was today. Go from now to your deathbed and be the same thing. Be the same person. Blame everybody else. Look at your life. Lay on your deathbed and look back at your life, and realize that you've just repeated the same thing over and over and over and over again, without taking any accountability. That's going to be the ultimate suffering, isn't it? Especially if you've, God forbid, but especially if you've got a terminal illness, and you look back at your life and think, why did this all keep happening to me? And then all of a sudden the penny drops, and it's like, all you have to do is do something different. Try something different. Get disciplined. Not motivated, get disciplined. try something different. Now it's gone. You're about to leave, and your life's been the same. You've lived the same week, Monday to Friday, in the job that you hate. You've gone out at the weekends to drown the pain of the week away in the pubs and the nightclubs. You've complained about all the men you meet. You've complained about all the women you meet. And then you go back to work Monday in the same job that you hate, get to Friday again, go straight to the pub again. And you do that for 70 odd years of your life. And you blame everyone else except for yourself, for your own decisions. You blame everyone else except for your own decisions, because you're making decisions based on something that you think you have control over, but you have no control over it in that moment until you go to work on metacognition and, emotional awareness and cognitive reimprinting and, figuring out those working models. Yeah.
Now let's talk about what you do. Can you just give a very short exposé on what you do?
Yeah. So we work with individuals, and we look at, current behaviors that are, potentially dysfunctional or concerning, or are keeping people stuck in the same cycles. We map them out. So we get them out, we look at them together. We understand where they came from. So people get a little bit of an understanding of why they are the way they are, which is a big one for me. That can be almost as therapeutic as the entire process, is when they understand why, when they get
The haha moment.
that, yeah, it is the one. I've had people sit on this sofa behind me and be like, once we've mapped everything out and, we know where it's all come from, they broke down crying, and it's been like, oh my God, it's like, I just thought I was always stuck. I thought this was me for the rest of my life. And it's like, no. If you've adapted from that previous experience, you've created behavior. You've created emotional response, internal working models, internal voices within. You've created them from previous experiences. So we can start recreating. You are the master. You are the creator. So yeah, it's a really important thing for people, is that aha moment. And once we get people to that point, that's when we start going to work. We start looking at, future orientation. Who do you want to become? Then we look at some of the psychology and the principles of the psychology of the people already in those positions. So what type of person do we need to get ourselves towards those people, towards those positions? What type of person do I need to become? Confident, do I need to be, driven? Do I need some, expertise in a different area? Do I need to be able to regulate my emotions? But whatever it may be, I generally work with people's behavior and internal voice, the internal working models, the internal voice within, and the emotional response to their environment. Because it is the thoughts and the emotional response which drive behavior, and the behavior is what drives the outcome. And if you ain't enjoying the outcome, you have charge of the thoughts and the emotional response and reaction and the behavior which is creating the outcome. Yeah, we reconstruct that for everybody. I've not worked with anybody yet. If you go on our website, you can see I've not worked with anybody yet that hasn't come out so much better off. One of the key things people keep saying in my testimonials and stuff is nothing's the same. That is one of the key phrases that my clients come to. Nothing's the same anymore. It never will be the same again. Because once you understand these principles, nothing is the same. You can't go back because you've separated from it. You completely separated from it. You're no longer driven by it. You're no longer possessed by, you're no longer possessed by your previous experiences.
What would you say is the biggest shift people have when they start working with you?
That aha moment, that understanding why, because the brain's an energy demanding organ, right? We spoke about this before. Very energy demanding, demands a lot of energy. So the brain will lie to you. It'll pull out information from the environment and contort it and twist it to make it fit your internal working model, right? Very exhausting, because the brain doesn't like not knowing why. Yeah. The brain wants to know why, or, it wants to make sense of everything. That's why perceptions shift in different individuals. You can have 5 people in a room going through the same experience, and you've got 5 different perceptions of that experience, completely different perceptions. And it's all because of the internal working models, the cognitive, adaptations through the evolutionary of their cognition through their environment. Everyone's got these different working models, these different internal voices, the difference in emotional regulation through different, environments. So it's, people slowly but surely start to realize that, they really can, take a hold of that and become the master of those things. And yeah, it's life changing, changes people's lives when we know why, the big one.
So I'm sure you must have had this experience where people come in and their first session and say, "This is who I am." Especially when they are talking about their past experiences or their current behavioral pattern, and they talk to you, "This is who I am." So what would you say to them?
Oh, brilliant. So great question. So if someone turned around to me and said, "This is who I am," in the first session, well, this is just who I am, I would agree. This is who you are now, right here, right now, right? So the only thing that exists, so let's go into a little bit of Eckhart Tolle's stuff because I like his stuff. The only thing that exists is now. So I am me now, right? I'm not future me, or, I'm probably a representation of past me, but I am who I am now in this moment. But it doesn't mean that I can't put myself in an environment or learn something new now. I could read a book now and it could change the course of my life forever. I could make one singular decision now in this moment, the only thing that exists. If I made a conscious decision, not a decision based on my emotional reactions, I made a conscious decision right now, completely changes the course of my life forever. Tiny macro decision, tiny conscious macro decision changes the courses of people's lives. So yeah, you are who you are now. And if you sit in front of me and say, I am who I am, yeah, you are. But do you want to keep doing this? Do you want to, you want to keep riding the same wave? Or do you want to try something new? And if you do, and you're yes, yeah. Buckle up, buttercup.
What would you say actually changes when someone understands their thinking properly?
Say that.
What changes when someone understands their thinking properly?
So there is a it's quite common. So there's stages through this, right? So usually we get that aha moment when we, start mapping everything out, finding out where everything comes from. Then there's the accountability, because now I know why. I have to take accountability. It almost forces you into this accountability, right? And then there's a stage when we start looking at the internal voice, when we start breaking it down, we start looking at the content, how, what is it saying to you? What is the consistent content? What is the most predominant content? Oh, I'm rubbish, I'm terrible, I'm not worth anything, and say for an example, for the most part, my internal dialogue is a representation of that self-sabotage, right? We become it. So again, thoughts, emotion, response, action, behavior, right? So there's an identity here, because this is who I am. Like we said earlier, this is who I am. So once we start separating people from that thought process, from that internal working model, that internal voice, once we start separating people from that internal working voice, once we start separating people from that internal voice, there is what I've seen quite often is an identity crisis, not a crisis where it's it's worrying and scary, but it puts people in this state of, oh my God, so who am I then? Because I've always been driven by this internal voice. I've always thought this is me. So when you realize that isn't you, there's this conflict in identity. So who am I then? the big question in my documentary, who am I? The big documentary, who am I? So then we go to work and figure that out. And that's when we start exploring the things like, okay, so what is it that you enjoyed when you was a child? You know, what is it that tell me about some memories of things that really lit your life up? You know, I went traveling with my parents, and you know, I did this drawing on this beach while everyone was having dinner, and I just enjoyed like doing art and draw. Well, brilliant. Okay, so now we're building a new identity, which is formulated on the things that you used to enjoy, right? Not been, you know, pushed into you by society and the world around you. You need to be a doctor. You need to be a successful businessman. You need to be this. You need to be that. You need to be a teacher. You know, parents do it to the children all the time. You know, I'm not saying that they're doing it on, like, you know, intentionally, but it's called enmeshment trauma. People abandon their sense of self to pursue what their caregivers believe they should be doing. So they abandon who they are at a very young age. You know, when you go to school, you've been told, you're almost told to abandon everything. Right, look forward, fix forward. Oi, Kyle, stop being distracted. This is the Pythagoras theorem. You're going to need this maths when you're older. Okay, sorry, miss. You know, tell me about some occupations. Doctor, nurse, police officer, you know, lawyer. Do you know how many occupations there are in the world? Hundreds of thousands. I ask anybody here watching this now, on both hands, name me 10 occupations. I can almost guarantee you'll all rattle off the same ones. And I'll be surprised if you can even hit 10. And they'll be doctor, nurse, police officer, lawyer, you know, engineer. What else is there? You know, psychologist. Even you couldn't do 10. Hard. I find it very hard. When I actually do future orientation work with my clients, what I like to do is a task which seems really simple, but it's amazing. Get yourself on a job search website like Indeed or something. Type in your location, but don't type anything in the search bar in regards to what job you're looking for. Just hit search, and you'll get inundated with all the jobs in your area, all of the occupations and careers in your area. And you'll read things that there'll be a 2-word thing like, I don't know, you know, intuitive creative designer. You're like, oh, what's one of them? Click on it. Then you read the job description, and it's like, you know, art, drawing, using systems and software to create marketing tools and oh, do you remember when I used to go away with my family and I used to enjoy sitting on the beach while they was eating and doing drawing and stuff? Sounds a bit like me, that. An intuitive creative designer. You go to any school in this country, tomorrow and ask all the kids and children who need to be establishing their future, go ask them to name occupations, and I would put my life on it, my beating heart on it, and not one of them would come up with a creative, intuitive designer. But I bet the job's out there. So we're so blinded by information. We take on this limited information, especially from the media, especially from our current education system, and it formulates the internal working model. This is the internal working model. This is all I see. Doctors, nurses, and I've completely abandoned my sense of self because my sense of self doesn't fit in this rigid framework and box that society and the people and my caregivers, have, pushed inside of me. You've created an internal working model, so you're lost. And not only are you lost, but you've abandoned so many parts of yourself which used to ignite your soul because they don't fit in with the internal working models that are pushed on you. You need to pursue this, you need to do that, you need to do this. Oh, by the way, don't forget all the things you used to enjoy. Like, why are they not doing that with kids at school? Why don't they have an hour a week where they say to the kids, I tell you what, kids, you can do what you want within reason, you can learn whatever you want, and whatever you want to learn, the teachers and the teachers' assistants will come down and they'll encourage those parts of you, and you keep doing that through the developmental stage, and you're breaking those internal working models a little bit, but not breaking them in a bad way. You're expanding them, that there is something more than doctor, nurse, lawyer, fireman, police. I'm not saying these jobs are bad things, by the way, before anyone, in this current world where people are offended by everything. I'm not saying they're bad jobs, they're great jobs. We need these things, but don't abandon yourself. So that's the thing, you see. So that's why people seem to be so lost. And
any layman watching this would probably think you're a therapist.
I love that question.
So could you differentiate between E.P.I.C psychology, what you do, and other forms of coaching or therapy, please?
Is this working? Because I want everybody to hear this. I am not a therapist. What we do is therapeutic, right? And I've been trained recently and just been registered with a company in America for metacognitive therapy, because metacognition is a fantastic tool. Some psychologists use things like cognitive behavioral therapy, schema therapy. So there's loads of different types of therapy for people. But as a psychologist, myself, a contemporary psychologist, research psychologist, I use all psychological principles and theory. So my tool bag's big. Yeah, it's not rigid. It's not, stuffed into a box. I don't try and stuff everyone into the same therapy box. We go to work through psychological principle and theory. We look at who you are as an entire person. We don't look at just singular events. In therapy, we look at singular events and we talk through singular events.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so we talk through a singular events, which does help. So going through that process helps us regulate our emotions better. It helps us process what happened to us. But how on earth does it? So I go to therapy and I talk about something that happened to me in the past, and I just keep talking about it, and I've got someone I've got someone sat in front of me who's going, "Oh yeah, I understand how you feel. I start sort of justifying my feelings to that experience, right? So I'm like, "Oh yeah, someone understands what I must have gone through. Nice, so I can process it." Also, I would also argue that, justification to your feelings from those previous experiences are sometimes not a great thing to do, because if I feel terrible about myself because of what happened to me and I've got someone in front of me going, "Oh yeah, I understand why you'd feel like that," I then go, "Oh yeah, so my feelings are justified, so maybe I am worthless." I'm not saying all therapists do this. Good.
Do anything but
Yeah. Some therapists, good therapists should be able to then guide you through that stage. But a lot of therapists don't, especially when you look at some of these ridiculous things you can get online now, where it's like, become a so-and-so therapist in 3 days. Like, it's taken me 8 years to become a psychologist. It's taken me 39 years of my own lived experience, plus 8 years consecutively at university, sacrificing my house, my car, to pay my way to go through university, to become a psychologist. And then there's people who have done 3-day courses and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm a certified coach and I'm a certified therapist." I'm not being antagonistic towards them types, because I'm sure there are people out there who are coaches and therapists, and they're amazing. And I actually know some good therapists, some real good therapists. But those good therapists are people who have done masters in psychology. They've done PhDs. They've done at least a minimum a degree in psychology. But then you get Tom, Dick and Harry, who's done nothing except for, fell over and grazed the knee when there was a child and thought it was a traumatic experience. And they feel like they can go do a 3-day course and then tell you how to live your life. It makes no sense to me. Psychologists, as a psychologist, we go to work on the science. We go to work on the science of the behavior and the thought process. We look at the cognition, we look at the neuroscience, we look at the therapy, we look at the different forms of therapy, we look at the psychological principles, we look at the environment, we look at developmental psychology, we look at complexity theory, the recursive feedback loops. And it's very difficult, because I'm not saying this in layman's terms, but what I'm trying to come across and sort of help people understand is people like myself. I'm regarded, and I regard myself as a behavioral scientist. I research behavior. I've done, all my research has been on free will, decision making, attributional bias, hostility, all forms of aggression, early life experiences, attachment theory. I have researched it with real people and found results. Yeah, I've not just gone online and done a 3-day course and now class myself as a certified therapist.
So this is a research-based, on tested proof.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I continually I mean, I don't think, you can talk to my PhD supervisors, they'll tell you, they throw like reading material at me because they know when they do, I'll read it. I mean, I wouldn't say, but if you look around, what's behind me on this sofa, Aberdeen? Books, like just tons and tons of books. Books are everywhere. On my side, they're on my cabinet at home. They're in my. I have 2 books in my living room. Yeah, just everywhere. I have books, and that isn't even close to how many books we actually have, right? So I know this sounds crazy. So I like to. This is a prime example. So this is how my mind works as a psychologist. I'm very broad in what I like to read, okay? So, and this is funny because this is actually happened today. I've got 2 books on my side on the breakfast counter at home, right? And in the morning I have my cup of coffee and I read these. I'll flick from one to the other depending on my mood. But this is the contrast, right? So I've currently got the Bible open, and I've currently also got a book on evolutionary psychology, which is completely the opposite of anything spiritual, right? Completely. The Darwinian theories, evolution. So I swear, I wish I could show you a picture. In fact, I might add a picture to this video just to show you when I go home. I've got one there. One's the Bible, one's the evolutionary psychology book, and they're both open. And some mornings I go, I fancy a bit of the Bible today. I'll read the Bible, and then the next day I'll wake up and I go, let's have a look at evolutionary psychology. 2 completely contrasting viewpoints, right? But there is so much value in both of those readings, right? People think that they're completely against each other. They're actually not. And if you read in that manner, you can actually find connections, and you actually realize that it's not all black and white, which a lot of people we live in this black and white world, don't we? Especially in the current culture that we live in. I believe this and everyone else should believe the same thing, or you're the devil. We live like that, don't we? It's like, especially when you look at the current politics, it's like everyone's pitted against each other because no one's able to think anymore, because nobody has the ability to bring 2 opposing views together, like the Bible and evolutionary psychology, and be interested enough to read them both and think for themselves, and actually think that actually they're not a million miles away from each other. They're not as separate as you may think. So I think it's a brilliant thing to be able to do.
So if someone is watching this and they know they are stuck, but they keep putting it off, what would you say to them right now?
Do it. Start today. Again, the only thing that exists is now. I mean this so much. Anyone who's watching this, the only thing that exists is now, right now. And not even that now. I can't even grab the now that I've just said, or this now. I can't even grab it or change it. There's nothing I can do about it. But what I can do right now, if I become conscious of myself and become the observer of myself, I get to decide how I act now. I could pull a funny face and make people laugh. I could get really serious. I get to decide what happens. But see how you smiled when I pull a funny face, and then when I get really serious, what happens when I get really serious? People adjust, and then we go back to that recursive feedback loop, right? I smile, I'm happy. My environment reflects that back to me. Recursive feedback loop. If I behave this way, this is what happens. So if I'm not in control of that, and I'm always mardy and grumpy and hostile, my environment elicits a hostile worldview.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Nailed. Aberdeen psychologist should be. But yeah, it's the truth, mate. It's the God's honest truth. Just do something now that's going to be different. Just try something. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Go to my website and book a call. Do it. Just do it.
Do it, please.
Just make the move, man.
So what would you say life actually starts to look like when someone finally breaks their destructive patterns?
Beautiful. Oh,
especially for someone that has lived a life.
Oh, you catch me off guard, mate, because I have I have this overwhelming feeling, man, when I hear, you know, I get people message me, clients, and I go onto the portal that we work with people on, right? And I can, in the mornings, I'll read the books that I've got, and then I'll start going through the stuff that my clients are working on the portals, on their individual portals, and I'll see metrics. So that when we measure progression, right? And I'll see 2 or 3 days like they've gone from a 6 out of 10 to a 9 out of 10 or an 8 out of 10 in like, you know, emotional regulation or reactivity or, you know, productivity or, you know, self-compassion. And I immediately am like commenting on the portal, like, yes, you ask my clients, I'm like, yes, let's keep going, more, keep going. You know, it is sensationally beautiful to watch because we are all capable. And I absolutely lived my life from day one with meaning and purpose now, because I want people to experience what I've experienced, not the pain and suffering, but the breakthrough. You know, I am here on this earth to guide people through. I am here on this earth to guide people to and through their own breakthroughs.
And what would you say is the biggest lie people tell themselves that keeps them stuck?
It's not my fault. It's not that simple. I love it. I love this. There was a guy called E.P.I.C. Anyone who hasn't watched it, watch the film, bleed for this. It's about a fighter, a boxer. And he hit the nail on the head. And it's the same thing we all say to ourselves all the time. It's not that simple, right? It's too hard. It's just too difficult to do. It's not that simple. It is. You know, and you watch the clip from the film, and it's a real film, real story, about E.P.I.C. And he's just cut it short. He was a fighter, boxer, broke his neck, and they said he'd never fight again, right? And he had to have his neck like framed. He had to have a halo, they called it, around his head. They wanted to fuse his neck, right? They said, oh, we're gonna have to fuse your spine, so you're not gonna be able to turn your head. And he refused. He was like, I don't want it done. And the doctor, there's a famous you know, interview with him and the doctor says to him, I'm really sorry, E.P.I.C. Vinny, you're never going to fight again. And he turns around to the doctor and he says, I'm sorry, Dr. Carter, but you don't know what kind of man I am. I will fight again.
Yeah.
And listen, all the medical staff, all his friends, all his family were just trying to motivate him to give up. Not motivate him to carry on, motivate him to give up. Just give up. Just you're putting yourself through pain and suffering, trying to think you're going to fight again. Aberdeen, not only did he fight again, they took the halo off his head. His neck was okay. He didn't only fight again, he came back and beat Robert Duran. And for those who don't know who Robert Duran is, he was the hardest hitting, so neck injury, hardest hitting middleweight of all time. Vinny Paz come back and took the World Heavyweight Championship belt off him. And what he said in the interview is, the interviewer said to him, what's the biggest lie they've ever told you? And he said, it's not that simple. And they said, what do you mean it's not that simple? He says, no, he said, that's the biggest lie they tell me. And they tell people it's not that simple. And the answer is, it is that simple. And the simplicity is in this moment, I just need to make a decision that's going to change the course of my future. And it doesn't have to be big. It can be really small, but it's really that simple.
On the last thing, the last question, if nothing changes for someone over 1 to 3 years, where does that path lead? Say if nothing changes for someone over the course of 3 years, where does that current path that person is going through, where does it lead?
The same place they were in the 3 years, if not worse. So I do believe this to be true, and I think anybody watching this can probably understand what I'm about to say. So if you've repeated the same thing for the last 3 years and you don't change, the situation and the outcome will get harder, almost unbearable, right? You think about it, when you do something and a bad thing happens and you keep repeating these, these behaviors and keep getting these, outcomes, these outcomes get harder. And it's almost like the world or God, whatever you want to believe is looking at you and going, come on, Aberdeen, you're not figuring it out yet. How much harder do I have to make it for you before it clicks, before the penny drops? Oh, no, I know what I'm doing. It's not my fault. It's everybody else. Repeat it again. And God's like, come on, I'll make it harder just so to wake you up and see, so you can see it. Oh, no, it's not my fault. It's everybody else's. And God's just like, I'm just going to make it that hard for you to a point where you're going to have to do something. And sadly, some people either go over the wrong side and, in worst case scenarios, take their own lives, or they do the thing that I said earlier and they make a decision in that moment, in the only thing that exists right here, right now, to make a decision.
I know I said that was the last question, but I'm going to ask this last one, hopefully. When can people expect to start seeing changes in their lives after their first meeting with you?
Within a week. So long as they implement the things that we ask them to implement. Change doesn't take a long period of time. Sustainable change and consistent change, takes time, and once you start recalibrating those behaviors and those emotional responses and those behavioral outcomes which create the environment, once you start managing those, your entire life changes. Again, look at the testimonials on the website. Nothing's the same. It can't be. It's simple math, isn't it? In the nicest way. If you put 5 and 5 together and you keep getting 10, and then every single time you put 5 and 5 together, you keep getting 10, people just keep blaming the 10, the outcome. Oh, why does it keep happening to me? Well, just let's try 4 plus 5. Oh, there's 9. Oh, it's a little bit different, that. I've got a little taste of something different.
Or add an half to the 5.
Whatever, yeah, it's small. That's how small it can be, though, right? But once you do that consistently through time, small, tiny changes, it's not it's called the compound effect, right? You do small things consistently over time, things will change real quick. But you have to stop blaming everything outside of yourself.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
When should we expect you to write a book?
Soon. I'm actually in the process of writing a book called Who Am I, believe it or not. Yeah.
Okay, and it's not medical book or medical research book?
No, it's all to do with my life. And I think this is the reason why I think people are more drawn to work with me, because, just by looking at me, I'd like to think you can see that, I'm not your typical psychologist.
Yeah.
You go in, funnily enough, my friend did it the other day. He said, because he was talking about like the difference between like me and other psychologists. And although on paper with qualifications, I'm exactly the same, when you Google image a psychologist or ask AI to give you a typical psychologist, it's it's usually a woman, believe it or not, because women, typically women in a suit or a man in a suit, very straight faced, very, people who, I'm not saying that they haven't, this is, I'm not generalizing here, but they do look like they've not seen, a grazed knee in their life, shall we say. I'm not saying that's the case, but they look that way. And when you come across that way, people are going to drop off working with you real quick, especially if you're not, personable as a psychologist. You can look like that, and if you're extremely personable and, you're a psychologist worth their salt, actually using psychological principle and theory instead of one rigid framework, then yeah, there are some fantastic, magnificent psychologists out there. But people tend to, I think, work with me because I refuse to fit in the image of, I refuse to fit in that image, in time. Even when I'm Dr. Kyle Walker, I will never enter a room and introduce myself as Dr. Walker. I'll introduce myself as Kyle, because that's who I am. The other thing is just all like confetti.
All right, Kyle, thank you so much for doing this again. All right. See you next time.
Cheers.